stereo.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Spenser from OTOY. Andrey over here in the corner. He's my wingman. And we're going to talk about Gaussian Splats today, the new primitive for 3D capture. And you guys have heard about Gaussian Splats. Yesterday we talked about them a lot. And we talked about them in terms of world models and generative AI a bit, but we're going to talk about them in a more granular manner towards 3D and what they can do for 3D artists. So what are splats? They're point-based 3D representations, and that's really interesting because they're not geometry. So they're point-based. They're just millions or hundreds of thousands or tens of little splats. They're called splats, little orbs, and they come together and they make a 3D representation, volumetric representation. They're real-time rendering, so they're very fast. They don't need to be constrained by all the shading languages and everything else we do with 3D traditionally. They're photoreal, and they can be very compact, and that's one of the best things about them is you can get entire worlds, environments, or very dense, high-fidelity assets and button them up into a small package. They support multiple capture workflows, and we'll talk about some of those, and they're an alternative to a mesh or NeRF. And here's a quick video. It's a crude little representation of kind of what a splat is. You see these little orbs, these fuzzy little blobs, and they can hold color and opacity at different rotations, at different view dependencies, and they come together to build something, a 3D representation of an object. So that's where, maybe traditionally you've heard about splats and how, they're just fuzzy little blobs, but the more and more, refined they get, you can get these really nice high fidelity assets, and you can do immense things with them, from like hair strands, plants, and lots of different things that you could never do with geometry, or you could, but it would just be very, very, very heavy. So under the hood, they're very light, and they're relative to 3D artists because they're just point data. So with that point data, we can deform it, we can use it in 3Ds in different ways, and it's accessible. So that's the cool thing about it. So what are the spherical harmonics? So level 0, 1, 2, 3, spherical harmonics, that view dependency, it's going to have color. It's going to have a move over here, it's blinding me a bit. So it's going to have color at different angles, that view dependency. So at spherical harmonic level 3, it's full color dependency. So you can look at an object, a splat, from this angle, and then look at it from this angle, and the color can change completely and dramatically. At level 0, it's flat. Everything's uniform in color. And this is also a way that you can use to your advantage to drop down the file size. I mean, at level 3, it's going to be a lot more data. If you consider millions of splats, they're going to have a lot of color on them. So at level 0, it's going to have maybe 80%, 90% less data in that entire splat package. So that you can use this as to your advantage in the long run, almost like a level of detail, just to drop things down if you need to. If you don't need this spherical harmonics, if you don't have something that's super reflective, then you can drop it down to 2 to 1. 2 to 1 is kind of interesting because here I have this crude representation, and they kind of look similar, and they are kind of similar. So it's one of those things like per asset. Everything's going to be different based on what that actual asset and the information is and the way you capture it too. But harmonics are one of the things about splats that makes them great because at full 3, you can get different shading looks that's baked in. So it's almost like it's a real-time shader itself. These are some splat assets. If we're talking about splats, they're not just fuzzy blobs. They can actually produce something really cool. So we can see some high-fidelity assets. This is the world's most high-fidelity Moss splat asset by yours truly. Moss is cool for 3D people. We all enjoy Moss. A good Moss asset's hard to find. But you can use it just like your traditional 3D asset. You can scatter it. You can use it in different ways. And there are more splats in this asset than there are in these environments. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. But that's the thing about splats. It can be localized to one singular asset, or it can be an entire world. And that's why splats are so powerful. There's so many different ways you can present them. Let's go forward, not back. Okay, so this is an example of how splats are not just static. I mean, they're static, but how you can animate them. So you can do things with splats that you could never do with geometry, because every single piece of geometry is dependent on all of the things that are involved, the faces, the edges, the points. And with splats just being point-based, we can use them, we can advect them in different ways, treat them as particles, deform them. And it's really, really interesting because when you do something like this, you get a unique, just a unique representation of this way that you couldn't get with particles or anything else. So here's an example of how you can take some splats and you can rig them. you can use a volumetric captured splat with a 3D volume, which was a 580 megabyte VDB, and you can turn it to a splat and then just deform it and use just deformers in real time, and it just works because it's just point data. So there's lots of cool things you can do with splats. They're not just this static asset that you can't do anything with. They're very much a 3D asset that you can really use, in many different 3D ways and methods. Traditional workflows that you have, they can apply because it's just point data. So I have a tree here in a second. So this is just fly advection, and again, just the explosion. Right here. So this tree capture, a tree is made up of millions of different points. It was probably a 3 million polygon asset, but converted to a splat, it's all points. So now, it's not dependent on just the leaf geometry, the branches, the trunk. I can just treat this just like points and deform it freely, and it just works. So it's really cool. You can just get unique different tree lines just by doing some zigzags and applying a tree. This right here is Andrey's tractor beam. And if I had a tractor beam noise, I'd insert here. But let's play this. That was pretty cool. And that's, what was the splat there? Just the tractor?
Yeah, it's just a random object I captured with my daughters on a farm.
Yeah. So he took the tractor.
You can capture them anywhere.
Yeah, completely dismantled and destroyed the tractor and infected it into particles. And that's really cool. I'm going to watch it one more time. All right, so let's talk about capturing. High fidelity 3D capture from real world assets. So we're going to talk about this way. This is the traditional method first, and then we're going to go into some other methods. So for real world capture, it's actually quite simple. I mean, you just need data. You need the photo or video, then you do the reconstruction, the SFM, the solve, and then you train the splats, and that's where it deviates from typical photogrammetry. Capturing splats, the first few steps are very, very similar to photogrammetry, but once you start to train, that's when you break away from that, and it becomes more of a neural process. So when you're training the splats, that's when it takes all of the point data that's captured from the point cloud of the object, and it starts to replace them. It starts to say, that doesn't go there, let me move that over there, let me move that there, and it starts to train based off the images and the cameras that are trained in the reconstruction phase. So then you get to the optimize, the clean and compress. This is mostly manual. You can do optimizations that are automated and stuff, but this is just how you want to clean up your splat, present it, and then you got rendered. So it's a pretty simple pipeline, and it's kind of unique to its own process. This right here is a video captured in lovely Columbus, Ohio in the fall, and I just walked through the woods with my trusty iPhone. This is one of my biggest splat capturers right here, and so I just recorded a minute of video walking, and then immediately, not immediately, after processing it, after taking that video and processing it, I now have this full splat world environment from post-shot, and as you can see, I can jump back in here exactly where my camera data was, and I can use that in 3D even. I can bring that in. It's completely solved camera data that I can export out. So it's not only the asset of the splat, but it's now the asset of the camera itself. I can bring that in Alembic, and I can use that back in 3D in Octane. I can relight the splat, start incorporating more geometry to it, and this is great. This is great for compositors, for 3D artists, for videographers, for anyone who needs solved camera data. You can bring that back in later in post, and it's there. And since the splat is view dependent from that camera data which is already trained, it just looks really good, and it's high fidelity. I'm not scattering millions of leaves. I'm not building trees. I just walk through the woods.
I think it's also important to mention that Octane is the only engine in the world that can do that.
Yeah. I'm loud.
Yeah, Octane.
Yeah.
To what? Process that?
To bring in these splats and relight them and use them in the same way. I mean, it's a very, very kind of efficient pipeline, and it just looks amazing because this was taken on just a walk on a phone, and now I have full control, over all the cinematics. I can drop the depth of field, add objects, and just control it because everything's already solved. I don't have to go in and do a lot of match moving and doing things that would traditionally take a lot of time. All right, so let's talk about synthetic 3D GS capture, and this is from 3D assets. This is where it becomes more of an IO, an exchange format, and this is really what I'm interested in lately because it's super powerful. It's powerful for 3D artists to understand that you can take your assets and migrate them over to a splat format, and that's really, a useful method. I mean, using Colmap data sets, that's the most traditional method. That's going to bridge the gap and take it from, asset as is, and we have explicit directions from Colmap that says we know exactly where the camera is in space. That's your camera intrinsics, your camera extrinsics. We have points 3D. We have a point cloud from the object itself, and with the images folder, that's our data set. So that's the renders. And everything from a splat always needs data. You need images, you need video, or you need renders. So for 3D, it's easy. So let me play this video. I make myself a little rig, a helix rig, and I make some renders. So I have this tree asset I want to convert to a splat. It was kind of really heavy. I'm using the Colmap bridge for C4D here, and that's going to establish a point cloud on my 3D asset. It's going to give me a Colmap data set, cameras, images, and points 3D. And then I just need my data set. So these are the renders. This is the render network. You guys heard of the render network? This is what I use to make my data sets. So I can export out all of these data sets very quickly, 300, 400 frames. And then all I need to do is package that up into my images folder and drop that Colmap into PostShot, and it trains. And it builds out a 3D representation of my 3D object. And this is it training right here. You can see the little splats, the orbs resolving, being all fuzzy. And after about 15 minutes of training, it turns into high fidelity. And this is going to be based off your settings that you choose. Here's the point cloud. Give it a second. And you can stop the training anytime. It's kind of fun to watch splats train because they are just like fuzzy little blobs trying to figure their way out, But after it's done, you get a nice full asset, and it's always going to be based off your data. So you're not going to get something that you didn't expect. You see your renders, you know what's going into it, you know what you're going to get back out. So that's a great thing about it, is you're not going to have any random bird that's going to happen to just approach in the tree. All right, here's another example. This one is a cool guitar. This was an 18 gigabyte VRAM guitar in Octane, and now it's an 18 megabyte asset that runs real time on the web. So I converted it over to a splat. I have full harmonics. You can see all the reflections retained still. So I can put this on websites. I can scatter this 50 times in my scene now. I have a full 3D asset of it that was before, like I said, an 18 gigabyte VRAM hog when it was in Octane. Now it's still that Octane asset, but everything's baked and consolidated into just a unified splat. And I have another one coming up here too. I did a second guitar, hopefully. There we go. And this is another one, just a bunch of decals on a guitar. We can see it training, and then we can see the resolve. So everything's baked in, full real-time asset again. And it's a nice exchange format. You can do this with your assets. You can put them on webs if clients want GLTF, GLBs, which traditionally is a pain in the ass, and it kind of sucks because you're always constraining yourself to mitigate everything from the shaders and bake everything out. Now I can take assets directly from 3D, even with stylized lighting, and I can bake this stuff so I can put it on a website. I can use this back in 3D even. I can take this back into Octane and re-render my render. I can re-render my splat. So that's it. That's what I'm doing right here. So this is the splat itself back in Octane. So it's a cool little blend of capabilities there. Now I have this unified asset I can give off to somebody else who uses Redshift, and they won't be able to render it, but they can look at what I did and say that was cool. It's view dependent. So if I did all 4K images at this zoom in, then that's what I'm going to get back in return. But if I did very, very low res images, and that's what I fed in, that's what I'm going to get, my low res results.
Subsurface scatter, like the material properties, are you losing any of that by converting it to a splat?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you're not getting simulated subsurface based off that view. It's view dependent. So I see your ear subsurface from here, right, and I'll see it from here, and that's baked in. It looks nice still, but it's not true. I'm not actually putting light through that to get it, because you lose all those properties. Okay, so mesh versus splat. So this is the yin, the yang. This doesn't replace this. It's an alternative. This is a new method. This is something that fills a lot of gaps. We still have geometry, but geometry is slow. Geometry is heavy and non-universal. I mean, I can't take I can't take a Blender's cycles and just open it up in Cinema 4D Octane. It just doesn't work like that. But with splats, it does work like that. It's point-based. You can button it up into tiny little, consolidated packages. It's real-time. It's performant. So it's point-based, real-time performant, and I say universal shading just because I can take it from here. I can put it on the web. I can put it anywhere that a splat is readable, and it's going to look almost one-to-one. So that's the great thing about it. Let's talk about LODs. You guys know what LODs are? Levels of detail. Traditionally we know about making stuff super low poly just so you can use it and scatter it and everything else. With splats, you can kind of approach LODs in a different way. We talked about spherical harmonics, 0 to 3. That's a good way to get your file sizes down, but also low max splat training. You don't always need to push 3 million splats in an asset. If you know you want to use 525,000 of these splats on a mountaintop, I can take these groups or these individual assets and I can just train them at a lower max splat training. And for this case, that's what I did. And then compression. We can always compress more and more. We're learning different compression formats. We're getting them smaller from POY, which was natively, everything. It's not as compact, but it's also a bit more non-destructive. And now we have SPZ and we have SOG. We have other formats that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We're learning how to make them smaller. We're learning how to button up worlds, assets into smaller packages. And that's the great thing, is this is an adapting format that's growing and growing, and we're getting better at it. All right, generative world models. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, and there was a preview in Studio B on this. This is Marble World Labs, and you can generate environments, worlds, just based off images, off video, off 3D scenes themselves, and you get really nice results. And you can push these directly back into Octane and use with your 3D scenes and your 3D assets. So it's a great way to kind of build scenes, build worlds, and like I said, these worlds, they package up into 25 to 35 megabyte file sizes now, which is really incredible. It's not perfect, obviously. There's still some quality issues, but with these worlds, you can concept quick. You can get out different ideas. You can package everything up that you see around you with images and convert that over to a world as well. And that's all from Marble World Labs, and there's other resources out there too that do similar things. Okay, so why splats? Other than the 100 reasons we talked about already, they're highly compact, which is great. Very performant, GPU friendly, less VRAM consumption, and super photorealistic. If you're talking about things where you always have like geometry you just couldn't reproduce, just like small fibers and stuff on hairs, on like flowers and things. That's really, really, really good for splats because you can resolve those and keep those little fine hairs. It's amazing at some certain things. I always tell people, if you have old photogrammetry data sets from years ago, if you kept them, bring them back out and dust them off and then try to produce some splats from them because you'd be surprised. But yeah, that is Gaussian Splats, and that's it.
Happy to help, mate.
Yeah.